So the question is, how are you going to show up, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to be showing up in these moments? There's so much going on in the world, right? There's a lot of strife, there's adversity, there's uncertainty. And in the midst of all of that, we still have choices. In the midst of all of that, and every reason for, Stu and the team to say, we can't do it. There's too much going on. In the midst of all of that, they ask the question, what can we do? What can we do to shift the needle of possibilities for young people? What can we do to equip educators to continue to serve, or to serve in even more powerful ways? What can we do to change the narrative in terms of what's possible as we journey through adversity? If I were to ask you the question, how many people who are in this space have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, to put your hand towards the camera, there'd be many hands going towards the camera, for sure. Now, if I ask the question, how many people in this space have heard of post-traumatic growth, maybe there may be a little bit less hands moving towards the camera. And post-traumatic growth is a concept, the notion that we can journey through difficult things. And because we've journeyed through those challenging things, we could be better in terms of more connected to who we are as individuals, better in terms of being more intimately connected to our purpose, and better in terms of our ability to reach out and to embrace other people's perspectives, and to engage them in ways that make us collectively better. There's a quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, we're journeying together today. And in the spirit of togetherness and with that energy, when I say one voice, I'm going to invite you with passion and energy to say one team. Well, cover your ears, babe. One voice. One voice. That's what it takes, fam. That's why we're here. I have the privilege and honor of serving with this amazing, beautiful educator who cares so deeply about young people. She served in education for 20 years. She's spent 3 years teaching in a youth corrections facility. She's passionate about making a difference. And even though we're talking about how do you win in times like this, how do you, it's about, getting through and finding the silver lining and winning. But today we're going to encourage you to take an L. That's right. We're going to encourage you actually to take 3 L's. And I'm going to invite Skye to talk about what those 3 L's are as we share. Ladies, gentle sirs, in our non-binary family, huge round of applause for the one and only Skye Bowen.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, so excited to share the space. And like Orlando said, this is a pivotal time right now in our world. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that can make it very stressful and very difficult to go through. But what are you willing to do right now to show up? You are all here in this space, creating an opportunity to learn more, to connect with other people, and build those positive relationships and community that can empower you to be your absolute best, despite the circumstances that are going on around you. And so as we're talking about taking an L, we're going to talk about 3 L's that we want to leave with you. And the first one is about listening. Listening with a deep understanding, listening with the idea of not being judgmental, listening with the idea of understanding the importance and value of humility. There's conflict that happens right now. There are challenges that are existing. We're trying to figure out, how do we ensure that we are being inclusive? How do we ensure the diversity that exists within our communities is a safe space for everyone? The first thing we need to do is deeply listen. Not to listen just to get that information, but to understand, to really build authentic connections and relationships with one another so we can be our absolute best and we can continue to show up.
Mm-hmm. And it's about showing up. So sometimes people are like, they want to listen so that they could say, oh yeah, I heard that. I've heard that before. Oh yeah, I've heard that. You've said that many times, right? Or I heard someone else say that. I get it. It's not about what in terms of just stopping with receiving the information. It's about what we're willing to do in terms of how we take action with that information, how we bring that information to life, how we bring our understandings of the fact that we are connected and that we are better together. How do we live that out? Because it's one thing to understand it, right? But knowledge in and of itself isn't powerful. Knowledge in action shifts possibilities. right? So it's about taking what we learn, taking how we listen, right? And then putting those things into action in ways that can shift what's possible for us as a collective, and for those who are coming behind us, right? So the first L we want you to take is the listening L, deep listening. Go ahead.
And that listening, I just want to add on a little bit to that. When we understand the lived experiences of one another and understand that difference that exists, we can understand and learn to not measure the experiences of somebody else based on our own experiences, but learn to listen to understand their lived experiences and amplify difference in order to collectively come together. Mm-hmm. And so when we get to the next L, it's about learn. What are we willing to learn and unlearn about who we are and what we perceive to know and understand about each other? You know, I often say in a lot of conversation, we have to read, reflect, and respond. Because, you know, when we're reading stuff and looking at things through social media, we get all sorts of information. How are we taking that, reflecting on it, and then taking action with that material that we have learned and continue to learn about? So it's not just about learning, unlearning, and saying, okay, I understand what somebody else is experiencing and sitting with that, but what are you now doing to take action? And sometimes that action means taking risks. There are many people, teaching within the correctional facility. I heard tons of stories of young people who had been oppressed by a system that didn't love them, that didn't see them for who they were. And by hearing those stories, my position was I need to take action to address systemic racism in education, to take action to allow other people to hear the voices of those who have not been heard and who have been silenced. So what are you willing to do to take action? What are you willing to do to show that you are an anti-racist, willing to do the work to address the oppression that exists within education and within our communities so that we can all be better?
Mm-hmm. And we are built to be better. And we are built to journey together and in ways that shift possibilities, right? So when you talk about learning, one of the things that we've often said and we often hear is you can't teach someone something that they already know, right? Folks would be like, oh yeah, I already know that. What is this thing about? Anti-racism? Ha, I already know. What's this about? Right? So one thing is we encourage people to be open, right? And learn with the goal of being able to uplift others with that learning, not just to learn to be like, well, I've learned that. And if you studied the books I've studied, you could perhaps one day be like me. It's not about that. It's about learning so that we can. So it's the purpose of the education. It's the purpose of learning. If you understand that by learning, by being open and by acting on that which you learn that can edify and uplift and celebrate people's lived experiences, their contributions, and their history, collectively, it makes us better. But we have to be open to doing that, right? We have to be open to modeling that, because other folks are like, shoot, I'm not saying nothing. This cancel culture that we're living in, I don't want to be the next one that's being put on blast. So it's safer to just not say anything. It's safer to just keep thoughts to yourself. But the reality is, when we do that, you'll have people that are hurting and they'll look in your direction and they're not seeing you take any action. They're not seeing you say anything, right? And it just makes people who have been oppressed, who have been, silenced, who have not had seats at the table, it reinforces that their voices and their contributions don't matter in their own minds. Right. So it's so important to understand what is our role in terms of how we could shift the narrative. What is our role in terms of how we could learn so that we can dismantle systems of oppression, learn so that we can engage and embrace people's embrace people's genius and their wisdom and their contributions. How can we learn so that we can be collectively better? Because it's not about one of us, it's about all of us. We often say there is no us and them. Right? The moment we draw that line in the sand and say, this is us over here and that's them over there, then we collectively lose, right? So the first L is to listen. The second L is to learn, and to learn so that you can make a difference with that learning.
And the last L that we want to bring to you is about love. Mm-hmm. It's about understanding how do we uplift, how do we amplify, and how do we honor the voices of those around us. It is critically important that love piece is about really seeing the humanity in one another, really understanding who we are as individuals, respecting and honoring the differences that exist, and finding spaces to amplify those voices. So whatever you're doing around leadership, whose voices are being heard? What is the demographic that makes up the community of leadership opportunities, whether it's in business or education or school or whatever it is? Whose voices are being heard, and how are you amplifying? How are you encouraging the diverse voices of those within community? That is how we show love, because there's many, as Orlando has said, who have been suppressed, have been silenced, have not had the opportunity to have their voices heard. And when their voices are shared, they often feel that maybe it's creating division, or maybe it's not received very well because other people may not understand the oppression that's experienced. Mm-hmm. And instead of doing that, if we are really, truly, deeply listening, if we are really learning to unlearn and understand and reflect, then we can love one another and share and build community that amplifies the voices of every single person, not just those who we already know.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about love, we're not talking about like eros love, like we're not talking about that. We're talking about what's called agape love, like loving the humanity, loving the connection. One of the things that we often speak to is the notion of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Swahili word that means I am because you are. So not only am I willing to see the humanity in you, but we are willing to do all we can to honor that humanity in you, even if that means putting ourselves sometimes in harm's way to make sure that you know that we're honoring your humanity, because we don't have to journey alone, right? And even though we go through challenges and sometimes it feels like nobody else could possibly understand what I'm going through, and maybe they don't understand specifically your specific challenge, but other people have felt alone. Others have felt displaced. Others have felt less than. Others have felt like they're not enough. Like these are things that we share, but we sometimes project otherwise. And we project like, oh, it's all good. Didn't you see what I posted on Insta? Life is good. Everything's blessed. But the reality is life goes like this. I want you to say that with me, but you got to say it I'm about to say it how I usually say it, with a lot of energy. I'm just trying not to scare people, right? So repeat after me, right? Put your left arm in the air like this. Repeat after me. Life goes like this. Not like this. Life goes like this. And the reality is sometimes as we're, when things are there and for us to celebrate, we're like, woohoo, let's go, let's get it. But sometimes when things are going in directions we don't want them to go, or we're giving all the energy that we have and it feels like we're barely moving up the hill, sometimes people get it twisted and think that it's you, but it's not you. It's just life. And we could journey through these things, right? We don't have to be a victim to life circumstances, because we understand that in life, there will be circumstances that challenge us. There will be circumstances that are presented to us that will present as barriers and obstacles to the things that we hope and dream of, right? But in the reality, we don't have to journey through those on our own, family, especially in times like this, right? So the thought is, well, what if? What if the challenges that we're facing now, these challenges challenges of anti-Black racism, challenges of anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Asian sentiment, the conflict in West Jerusalem, and Gaza. What if all of these things that are causing us emotional trauma are actually things that allow us to come together and honor each other, come together and listen more deeply, come together and be willing to learn so that we can be better as we go forward, and come together so that in spite of all that we face, we could actually show up in ways that show love. What if? What if? I'm just saying, right? Because oftentimes it's like, well, I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what that experience is like. But now we're in a situation where even though we may not know the specifics in terms of the connection to that specific challenge, yeah, we know what it's like to feel like our lives have been disrupted, right? And there's been loss of life, loss of jobs, and loss of perspective in situations, right? But it's about what we do. What are we going to do with that? How are we going to show up?
And when we think about these challenges, Orlando, myself, our family, we've experienced anti-Black racism. We've been victims of some very difficult circumstances, and yet, despite that, we continue to be here. Despite that, we continue to rise. Despite that, we continue to encourage young people like yourself to see our stories, to hear our experiences, to learn from the people around you so that you can listen, learn, and love one another and understand and honor and amplify the humanity in every single individual. The time is now to show up. The time is now to really see and understand one another's lived experiences. The time is now to see whose voices have been silenced and suppressed and take action to address those needs and amplify everyone's voices. You have that gift. You are here right now because you have shown leadership capability, potential, opportunity in a variety of situations. And we are here to support you on that journey. So whatever it takes, we want you to know that 3Ls right now isn't a loss. 3Ls right now is championing you to greatness. And that greatness is about showing up.
I feel like just finding a mic to just drop after that. The reality is we've been through trauma, as Skye has spoken to, right? I've been a victim of police brutality, and then a legal or judicial system that was set up against us, where after being beaten and almost killed and going to seek representation, legal representation, and sitting in front of lawyers and pouring out all that we had been through, all the trauma and everything, and having tears flow and getting the chills because of the traumatic experience of retelling the story, and having lawyers look at us and say, well, because you're a Black male, we're going to suggest that you plead guilty to a lesser charge. And I remember looking at Skye saying, why would we plead guilty? I didn't do anything. And they said, it's not about you. The system isn't designed for folks like you, right? So it's moving from that, and people, and journeying through it, and being in a space where we were about to receive the verdict, whether or not I was guilty and how much time I was going to need to spend in prison. And shortly before that, the arresting officer in our case was arrested and charged and convicted and sentenced to go to prison. I was acquitted. And when he was sentenced, people came to us and they said, yes, we hope he rots in jail for what he did to you guys. Let's celebrate. And we said, no, we will not celebrate that, because the man going to prison is a father like I am. And he's a member of his community. We're not going to celebrate that. But what we will do is we will continue to show up. We'll continue to be willing to listen. We will be willing to learn and unlearn. And we will, with everything that's in us, we will show love, even to those whom we've been oppressed by. Because in order for us, the collective us, to be our absolute best, we need to let go of moments that challenge us from being present and from being able to celebrate the gifts that are right in front of us, and the gifts of times like this, where you have shown up, where you have demonstrated leadership that has brought you to this space. And now it's time for us to take action. Take these 3 Ls and use them to win, not just for yourself, not just for the folks who are on this call, but for society at large.